Before we begin, I'm just going to ask everybody to please silence your phone. If you need to use the restroom or step out, there are restrooms located on this floor. I believe the women's is on this side and then the men's is on this side. There's also restrooms throughout each of the levels if any of those are not available. We will be providing the slides as an attachment in the library documents in Zoom grants. For the purpose of those that are here, we have provided a packet. If you have not received one of these, please let me know and we'll make sure to get you one of these. This has a lot of the resource information and a lot of the things that we'll be going over today, so it's very helpful to have this in front of you. I do know that the slides are a bit small. I do apologize. I'm trying to save some paper. I already kind of have the packets pretty large. When I upload this to Zoom grants, I'll make sure that you have this version as well as a 1 page per slide, so it's easier to view. And the training will be interactive. Don't want you guys to get sick of my voice, so please, let us know if you have questions or if you have comments. We will be utilizing our fun little reward system. So anytime you ask a question or if we ask something and you're able to answer that, we will definitely make sure that we give you a good treat and you get to pick that. Okay. All right, looking at our agenda, right now we are going to be diving into part 1. Again, this training is required. For those of you that were unable to attend the training that will be listening to this recording, we will ask that you verify that you've reviewed the whole recording, and we'll make arrangements to get verification and completion of that. Looking at the general overview of funding, one of the big things that everybody wants to know, how much money does the county have? And how much money are we going to be able to allocate to the wonderful programs, community support service? Karen, do you want to go ahead and chime in on this?
Okay, so I want to give you a background. For those of you who have applied for a few years, you're going to look at some of these numbers and you're going to go, whoa, the amount that's available to nonprofits is a lot less. I want to give you some background on what's happening. The urban county, which is how we receive our dollars through HUD, is made up of small cities and towns and the non-incorporated areas of the county. What that means is for those jurisdictions that are less than 50,000 people, the funds flow through the urban county, and we have that in one pot. As jurisdictions hit 50,000 or more, they are eligible. They become eligible to become their own entitlement, which means that that pro rata, that piece of the allocation that is specific to their jurisdiction, they have the ability to pull that and use those funds and receive those funds themselves. Their other option is to leave their funds in the urban county and have the county administer those funds. Once they have that ability, they also have their choice whether or not they want to come up with another agreement. So let me tell you what happened this year. If you haven't noticed, every place is, the populations are exploding in the urban county and we're losing those small cities and towns. We have 2 newly identified and 2 that were around 3 years ago that are now entitlement jurisdictions that are participating in the urban county. That is Mill Creek, Murray, Draper, and Harriman. So with that, if you are here and you're representing a jurisdiction that's one of those 4, the piece that would be the hard cost is basically set aside for your jurisdiction, whatever that amount might be. So when you look at these numbers, and I don't think we say it there, it's somewhere around 621,985. Thank you. 621. That has been pulled out of the total allocation, and that's going specifically to those four jurisdictions. What is left is divided. Half of it goes to the nonprofits, and half of it goes to the other 13 jurisdictions that are in the urban county. So that is why you're seeing that significant decrease that's available to the nonprofits and to the other jurisdictions this year. As the county continues to have those small cities and towns, are no longer small cities and towns, we will see this continue to decrease. So I tell you that so that you can also be aware in planning forward. You will also have an opportunity that we'll talk about a little bit later, but we're kind of excited because we are starting to plan for our next 5-year plan that begins in 2025. So we will have a strategic plan that goes into the next 5-year period that will really inform how our funding is prioritized. You will all be seeing invitations to participate in that needs assessment process within the next year. I encourage you to do that, especially for those of you that are seeing funds decrease and you're seeing priorities. Please, please, please help us participate. Let us make sure that we are informed in those priorities. But what you're seeing now is what is currently available. And so you've got about, I can't get that number right now, but 480,271, which is available to our nonprofits this year. And then we have about an equivalent amount that is available to the jurisdictions to apply for. That would be MSD, that would be the other South Salt Lake, those other small cities and towns. And then if you're Murray, Harriman, or Draper, come talk to us and make sure that we identify, because your funds are basically set aside for your hard cost projects. Yeah, Jason.
So for the hard cost project, funds that are set aside for those for the 3 Mill Creek, Murray, Draper, and Harriman. If we're doing hard cost projects in those cities that are specific to those cities, can we also be eligible for a portion of those funds? Or
so what would need to happen is you need them to sponsor. The application needs to come through them. Okay. They need to sponsor that. But yes, Mill Creek could say, hey, we want to give our, I'm pulling that up, so it's tough on them. But one of those jurisdictions can say, this is our project we're sponsoring to come through. They will actually need to make that, they'll need to come in through the jurisdiction application, and they will need to identify that. Be aware that, and it has to be hard cost, not soft cost.
If in the past we have done hard cost work in Mill Creek, does that mean that if we get county funding that we can no longer use that funding in Mill Creek?
It does not.
Oh, we still have it.
Yeah, it will still be overall urban county. We still need to show reasonable benefit for those projects that aren't specific to a household, but no, it doesn't include those 4 jurisdictions. Thank you. Any other questions?
Great.
Sunday? Yeah.
If we are applying as a nonprofit, but we have a building in, for example, South Salt Lake, is that something that we would go through for the specific South Salt Lake for the other amount, the 1 million, or would it go still through the 480? Or would it be 2 applications?
No, it'll be 1 application. It will come through here as the nonprofit.
Okay.
And those get a little bit tricky because depending on what your organization does, if it's a residence, if you're serving people in Mill Creek and it is specific to people that are living in Mill Creek, that is going to count as Mill Creek's allocation and where you report. However, most of the nonprofits that use our funds are familiar with that lovely population served table on tab 5 that says, hey, we track, this is what we expect to, or this is what we will serve, and we're going to serve 3 from Alta, and 10 from Brighton, and 20 from South Salt Lake, or whatever. So in that case, it's who you serve, because it isn't necessarily people that are living and residing there. So if you have questions about that, let's talk, but yes, it would come through this single application. You will not apply to the jurisdiction.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions on the analysis?
Great questions. So I want to let everybody know that these are outdated, but we wanted to give you a visual. So when we have, and we are in the works of getting this updated, we will send out an email as well as an attachment in Zoom grants under the library tab that shows that this has been revised. But here you'll see this map identifies the non-entitlement areas. and the unincorporated area. So anything that is in white is considered ineligible for these funds, and you would need to go directly to that jurisdiction for funding. The next document is the low and moderate income census data. Again, this document is currently being revised, but this will give you an idea of those census block grants, or excuse me, those census tracts. And depending on the national objective and who your target audience is, depending on what type of activity. So if it's an area benefit, you will need to make sure to utilize the interactive map. This will provide the percentage and the number of low to moderate clients, individuals in that area. Yes.
Make sure I heard your first part. In this map, for the community, for the hard cost community block grant, the areas, the jurisdiction will have to be the one of the colored ones, but the rest would be in the, like, could be downtown Salt Lake City. No.
No.
That's right, you're right. So no,
Now that's a good question, because you're a nonprofit, correct? And let me ask you, who are the clients that you're serving? Is it tied to the area, or is it tied to the clients?
refugees
Okay, so these are low to moderate clients
living across the county,
living across the county. Okay,
some cities, Taylorsville.
okay. And what type, if you don't mind me asking, what type of application would you be looking at applying? Like,
This will drive me around.
okay. Karen, do you want to help me address this?
So, remember we said it's a little bit tricky when you start talking about who you're serving because they're not residing. International Rescue Committee, you were serving people. You were going to show a reasonable benefit. So yes, we can do a public facility improvement that's located in Salt Lake City or others right at this moment, or those jurisdictions, the white.
Yep.
We can do that. But you're going to show that there's a reasonable benefit, and you're going to track. And when we talk about reporting,
Yep.
we're going to need to show that the people that you're serving are coming at a reasonable benefit to our 18 small cities, towns, and metro townships. And you may need to repeat that because I was trying to hear. So if I missed something on the question, will you repeat it so everybody can hear? I think I heard it.
Yeah, sorry. Repeat his question.
Yeah, just
Okay. So the question was, if you are located in Salt Lake City, but you are serving individuals throughout the urban county, is this an eligible activity? Yes, it is. You would just need to identify and explain the reasonable benefit that is tied to that activity. Yeah. If you are, for example, a nonprofit that is serving homeless individuals, that's a little bit different because they are it's a direct client benefit that is tying into a low to moderate income client, and so they are deemed eligible. We still ask you to identify in that during the fourth quarter, the number of clients that you've served throughout these areas, because it helps us identify where they're coming from, but it's not necessarily going to make them ineligible to be able to utilize the funds or the services. Okay. I'm not sure if you got a treat. Okay, perfect, thank you. Timeline, just looking at our timeline, today we're going to release the RFA. Tomorrow you will have the training for the soft cost application for those of you that will be applying. Just be aware that the applications will be due November 22nd. Here it says 5 p.m. Just be aware, we ask that you try and submit that before 4:59. The reason for that, there could be multiple reasons. we cannot guarantee that your application will be completed and accepted because of the way that we lock the system. So between now and then, I'm available to answer any questions or concerns. Dan is available as well as Karen or anybody else on our team. Come January.
Sorry, I'm
Yep.
gonna hammer that in one more time because I'm gonna call anybody out. There's 3 agencies that are in this room that, since I've been with the county, have called us at 5 minutes after or 10 minutes after and said, power way out. Zoom grant's locked up. It's not letting me hit submit. Different reasons. Okay. The reason that I'm turning gray, part of the reason that I'm turning gray is because I have to say, I'm sorry, there is nothing I can do. This is what we posted, this is when it's closed, there is not a darn thing, and I know you spent 40 hours working on this thing, there is not a darn thing we can do. Do not wait till before 59. Try to get it on a Friday day, try to get that submitted, don't wait till that last minute, because we literally cannot make exceptions to that, so.
With that being said, the applications are only accepted through Zoom grants. So if you do not have an account, I'd encourage you to go ahead and create one. And then in just a few moments, we'll go over where to find the hyperlinks to find those applications. Come January through the end of March, our citizen review committees will meet. The committee that will be reviewing these applications are the CDAC committee, and they will we typically meet on, I believe, Tuesdays, and in the past, those meetings have gone anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half to 2 hours each week. So they do put a lot of time and dedication into reading the applications. With that being said, we do have some individuals that like to target in on specific sections of the application. The committee members are required to read the full application. When we come and meet weekly, they will provide their comments, their feedback. If there is a clarifying question, if something is not clear within the application, we have the ability to come back to the applicant and ask you to clarify that. And we will ask for that information to be submitted through Zoom grants, and that's the way that we'll communicate that. We cannot ask any new questions. So if something is not clear, but it's not in the application, basically it's information that we're not aware of that we can provide back to the agency. Karen, do you want to kind of add to that?
No, I think you did great.
Okay. One thing I want to point out, for those of you that are familiar with the application process, whether you're approved or denied, the staff, we want to make sure that we provide feedback to you. And so we have been able to do agency debriefings. Last year, we were kind of crunched on time, and so we just sent the information out. In prior years, we've done a one-on-one. We can do a WebEx meeting. We can do an in-person meeting. And what we'll do is we'll identify those things within the application, whether it's something that's a strength or a weakness, and then some overall comments and suggestions. So we do have that information available if anybody wants to look at those general suggestions. I will make sure to have that available in Zoom grants under the library tab as well, and that way you can have that information as to what the committee members are kind of looking at and what has been a common issue or a concern in the past that hasn't necessarily been addressed. Okay, April. Typically around mid-April, we will have our public hearing, and that is the time that anybody that has been recommended for funding or not recommended for funding will come and either, say thank you or ask for reconsideration. That is a public meeting. We will be recording that as well, as it will be open to the community. We are still narrowing down the exact date and time, and so again, staff will make sure that we're actively communicating with everybody on that. We also utilize Zoom grants to send out notifications. So anybody that has been added as an application contact or a collaborator will receive those messages. If for some reason you're not receiving those messages in Zoom grants, it could be that it's going to, your spam email or something. Just let me know. Come May time, we have our final decision. That is a really busy time for Dan and I, because we start getting all of our activities set up under the programs. And we, again, just like we ask you guys to report the quarterly data, we have to report that back to HUD. So there's a system that we utilize, IDIS. And for this group, it would be CDBG funding. That is how we identify what the activity is, how it ties into the national objective, what the outcome is, and how the funds are being utilized. So we explain all of that. Again, by that time, we're starting to set up these activities, and we start working on contract negotiation come June. As you're aware, the contracts are typically a 12-month contract, period of performance starting July 1st, ending June 30th of the following year. I'm going to ask Karen to kind of just explain here at the end of the timeline. You'll see sometime in July. We are asking you to watch out for those opportunities that are tied to the...
Stay tuned. This is a different year again. Last year you may have participated or heard about the provider convening that we had. That was part of our needs assessment. We need to do that at the beginning of the year. We also held a community support services expo. From that, we received additional information on needs and priorities, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. I'm just going to be flat out honest with you. As many of you are struggling as well, we have had incredible transition in our department this year. And so I would like to say that we did our needs assessment in September. We did not. We did not have the bandwidth to do that. What we did do is our literature review, listening to our partners, and looking at what was there. So last year's needs assessment really informed this year. Again, we participate in a lot of meetings. We do listen to agencies when they talk to us, and you submit your reports. Says this is what's happening. This is why we're doing this. This is emerging. That also factors in to see if anything's new. What I want to tell you again is that we have this brand new opportunity to look at a 5-year plan. COVID's behind us. We're going to look at now where are we going forward. Please again watch for those opportunities, because what's going to happen is probably in about February. That's where we're starting right now. We're going to do another provider expo type event where we will invite all providers in the community that would like to come and share what they do with the community and other providers to come in and talk. And then following that, we'll have another survey for people to input where they think we're as far as is our finger on the pulse correctly on what's going on in priorities and needs. And then we will have a massive needs assessment with a lot of agency engagement, a lot of community events, a lot of things that will be handled by a contractor to go out and really figure out where we're going from here. So.
Great, thank you. Do you want to go ahead and go over the summary of the...
I didn't wear my glasses today, so I'm going to have to stand with my nose underneath this to see what this says. This is just basically to let you know that this is what informed. Nothing new really popped up. What it did is it helped us see that although the needs are all still the same and there's never going to be enough funds to fund everything that needs to happen, what we do know is that there are certain populations that are being left behind more than others, and we're still seeing that. So We can go ahead and go to the next one. Actually, go back, sorry. I'm taking a wild ride here on the PowerPoint. Go back one. The populations that were identified that you're going to see again, 55 plus, particularly in housing. We know that as rents go up, guess what's happening? Those on fixed income can't handle them. We're seeing more going to our homeless system. We're seeing more that are giving up food and medication in order to be housed. We know that. Sorry.
Here you go.
There we go. Perfect. Domestic violence survivors. Again, we know that these rise to the top for those individuals that still tend to be more underserved than others. I'm not going to say it's more dire, but it's just more numbers that we're seeing as far as the gaps in funding and the gaps in resources. Families and then sheltered families. Some of you that are involved in homeless services may have remembered that last winter, it was pretty much the first time we saw unsheltered families. We hadn't seen that in the level that we were seeing. I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head. I want to say it was 88 in 1 month, but we had unsheltered families for the first time. We didn't have a place to put them. Along with that were those larger families and immigrant and refugees, particularly. They have those larger household sizes. So again, we heard, we listened, we know that those populations were rising up more on the underserved. Medically frail homeless, particularly those that, again, either medically frail or at the end of life, continues to be a prioritized population. Severely rent burden, I just talked about. That's not only the elderly, but everybody, everybody in our state, in our county particularly. We know that we have a large number of people that are severely rent burdened, well over 30%, a lot of them over 50%. The homeless youth, again, that's always been a gap, particularly just because there's some nuances to trying to serve homeless youth. And so we recognize that, and those with disabilities that just aren't, all of these populations, what we're hearing, what we're seeing, what we're listening to is that these are the populations that are not recovering at the same rate as others that are trying to recover from the impacts of COVID. So just know you're going to see that represented if you're the grant writer and you're serving those populations and there's something that you want us to know about how you're serving them better or how you're serving them number-wise, or give us input and insight as to what you're seeing with these populations when you're writing your application. That is going to help you in your prioritization on your scoring. And then you will see again 2 pathways. One is economic mobility, one is economic stability. Dan will talk to that a little bit, but what that means is as we look at the outcomes and the indicators, we have bucketed them, meaning that there are certain activities or certain projects that we don't expect that we will see. You have seniors and you're helping them remain housed. We don't expect that they're going to be economically mobile. You're not going to go get them a job. They're not going to, that's not what the goal is. That's going to bucket into economic stability. There's others that we recognize, again, the efforts of programming just to help people become economically mobile, whether that is a better job or whether that is connecting with mainstream resources, or whatever it is. The programming outcomes, those efforts are intended to get your populations more economically mobile. You will see that reflected when you choose your outputs and your outcomes. So.
Great. Okay, what activities will Salt Lake County pay for? Here you will see a list of those types of activities. I'm just curious, is anybody applying for land acquisition? Okay, great. So it looks like we have one. How about economic development? Okay. Public facility improvements?
3.
Okay, great. About 4. And anybody here to apply for housing rehab or renovation activities? Okay. Does anybody have any questions on this slide?
You're gonna need to look in your packet because I know that there's no way that you could read that list, so you might have to refer to what's in your packet on this slide.
So here you'll see what we've prioritized. So anything that is an infrastructure as prioritized by the respective jurisdiction. Again, that is in Zoom grants, there will be 2 programs. You'll want to make sure that you're applying for the correct one. So if you're a nonprofit, make sure to apply for the nonprofit funds through that program and the jurisdictions. Just be aware that when we are reporting back, again, depending on the type of activity and who it will benefit, will determine the outputs and your outcomes. And later on, we'll kind of do a deeper dive into that, and I'll ask Dan to go over that as far as what's in the attachment, as far as within the application that will identify that. Here we just have a few takeaways. Again, the framework and scoring. For those of you that did not receive a scoring packet, let us know towards the end and we'll make sure that we give that to you. If I can ask you to go ahead and just pull that up and reference that, you'll notice that it identifies each of the application sections and how much the scoring weight is. And this is guidelines that we provide to our committee members. So as we're meeting weekly and we're reviewing the application, this is the guideline that we give them. We do ask that you identify the eligible activity within the program category that you're requesting funds to be paid for. And again, tie that and align that with the performance indicators. Articulate how your agency programming uniquely meets the needs of the underserved population, which have been prioritized. Again, if perfect, thank you. We do ask that you, again, there are a targeted population that we ask you to identify those numbers. Key takeaway, down payment assistance will not be prioritized this year like it has been in the past. Land acquisition for housing projects must be entitled land. And Salt Lake County HCD is proposing a housing project gap fund to facilitate opportunities for housing projects in the urban county jurisdiction for the prioritized population. Karen, do you want to speak more to that?
I think we've already addressed it.
Okay. Navigating the application in Zoom grants. Here you'll see those hyperlinks for each of those applications. Just for a visual, I'm going to go ahead and click on the first one, which is for the nonprofit and quasi-government applicants. You'll see that we utilize tabs 1 through 6. Give me one moment, I'm just logging in. For those agencies that have had a Zoom grants account, but you've had staff turnover and the individual that created the account is no longer with your agency, please let us know. There's a way that we want to go about. We can go in on the back end and let Zoom grants know that this individual is no longer there, but we don't want to necessarily take their information off of the application because and then it may completely delete the application, or we'll have issues with that.
Yeah, while you're pulling that up, I'm curious, raise of hands, how many have not used Zoom grants? All right, so it looks like most of you have, so we won't go into that a lot. Amanda will give a brief overview of it. Then it will go back more to what Amanda said. If you've had transition, two things that we've been seeing a lot with Zoom grants and new staff. Number one is you have an executive director that moves on, or a grant writer, and the profile was under that person's name, and now you can't get into it unless you have access to that email account. In that case, we're going to have to go in the background and do that and have Zoom grants make that shift. If you know when somebody's leaving and they're the ones that did that, make sure that you switch the account so that the profile for your organization is underneath an email that you have access to. Really important, otherwise it's going to tie you down. The other thing is as far as new staff coming on, we get this usually about week 2 of the applications being up. Somebody says, I can't see it. So-and-so in my office can, but I can't see it. That means that whoever your grant owner is, whoever is assigned as the grant primary, hasn't made that person a collaborator. If you have a fiscal person that needs to go in and do the budget, and give somebody else a program person that's going to come and do your populations table, make sure that they have been added as a collaborator, or they will not see it. They just won't see those tabs. So.
Great. And my web browser is being a bit slow, so it's taking me a minute to pull Zoom grants up. But just to let you know, within tab 1, that is the application summary. That's where you'll identify your organization, who the director is, your UEI number, address, all of that. Tab 2 is a pre-qualified, it's a, what do I want to say? Sorry guys, I haven't had enough coffee today. It's an eligibility section. So there'll be a couple of questions that you'll want to look at. If for some reason you're not able to answer those questions, again, let me know or let Dan know. You may not be eligible for the funds. Example, if, and I don't think it's necessarily a real example, but just an example if you're not a 501(c) and you're trying to apply for a nonprofit funds, automatically you're not going to qualify for that. Tab 3 is the application questions. So that is where you will go in and answer each of those questions. Again, looking at the scoring sheet, you'll be able to identify how much that is weighted within the application. We do have some agencies that have more than one individual working on the application. We do ask that before you submit the application, have somebody either within your organization or somebody that you feel comfortable with read the application and make sure it makes sense. Sometimes, we all do it. Sometimes I'm working on one thing, Dan's working on another, we come together, and we just need to make sure that it flows consistently. And if you're using acronyms, please identify what that acronym is. Not everybody's aware of the lingo. Tab 4 is going to be the budget. So there is, in that section is where you're going to identify what is committed, what is not committed. And again, because of the application being due in November, however, funds aren't actually provided until July. There's things that can happen between now and then. If you plan on applying for additional funding from another source, it is helpful to identify that in the application. Just let the reader be aware that it's not committed. If you know that funding is confirmed and you will be able to utilize it during July 1st to June 30th, then please identify that as committed and then identify what that source is. There you will also identify what the budget is. And so what the money that you're asking for, what is that going to go towards? Is it going to go towards, you know, a rehab single unit, or is this going to be a facility improvement? Tab 5 is the tables tab. Again, that's population served. Be aware, we utilize a Smartsheets format for reporting. And so within, oh, perfect. Thank you, Karen. So here you can see a visual of how we identify the population served. The goal here is to be able to identify the number of individuals coming from those jurisdictions that are benefiting from the funds, the services, the programs. During the final quarter, we'll have you provide information. Let's see. Here, we identify, again, the clients served by jurisdiction, income. One thing that's a bit new this year, not only are we asking you to identify single female head of household, but single head of household. That's a new question that we're looking at, trying to make sure that we're capturing that information. In IDIS, I need to report a single female head of household within the next, year or so. I believe that's going to change, and it's going to tie into single-headed household. So here, the county, we're already identifying that information. Yes.
Is that still for children 18 that are under 18?
Yes. Yes. The question was, is that for children under 18? Yes. All right. On this tab, you will also notice that there is at the very bottom, you will be able to identify, halfway through, you will be able to identify those agency contact information. So this is another section in Zoom grants that we ask you to identify who the fiscal contact is, who the program contact, executive, etc. Tab 6 is going to be the documents to submit. Here you'll see the documents requested. Right now, anything that identifies in parentheses application is tied to the application. In your packets, you'll see a contract preparation checklist. Anything that is green is a template, and anything that is blue is a hyperlink. This is where you'll submit those documents. One thing I did forget, and I apologize, Karen, will you go to the library tab? Here in the library tab, you'll see the documents that have been provided in the packet, as well as a few additional documents that they were just too big to print out. So for example, if you're looking at the Playing by the Rule handbook, that is extremely helpful and useful. This is information that we, and again, it's pretty long. I don't expect anybody to read this in detail. But this is very helpful if you are identifying, again, the type of activity, how and why we report and need to have that information. Let's see. Do we have any questions right now with the application? Okay. Okay. You nonprofit, correct? Okay. Derek, can I get a handout? For those of you that arrived a little bit late, we handed those out during the time that we did the introduction. So if anybody else does not have that, will you raise your hand so that we can make sure that we get you a scoring sheet?
Amanda, I do want to point out one thing really quick for those of you, just as a reminder. When you are on tab 4, and actually tab 5, when you're looking at the population served, this first section right here says program year 2022 actuals. This one over here says program year 2024 proposed. There's a reason for that. Some of you, actually all of our nonprofits jurisdictions have contracts now, I think. Some of you may not even have a contract right now for this year. So what we're looking for programming, particularly nonprofits, when you're giving us a program, whatever that might be, back to if you're serving homeless shelter or whatever you're doing, go to program year 22. That is the year that ended in June of 2023. It was July of 2022 to June of 2023. That is our program year 2022. So when we say actual, that's where we're looking for. So if you're looking at this for the first time and you're going, wait a minute, I don't have actual, but I clearly got my contract, go back here. If you are a jurisdiction and you are putting in numbers and you're using area benefit, not an actual benefit, you can use your census data that you're going off of to justify your project. And if you don't have anything, I didn't hear anybody here, but if you're a brand new nonprofit, you've never done this program before, you don't have any of this, that would be in a case that you could put zeros all the way down in your program year 2022. And then there's an area that you can give a narrative to just say this program wasn't run, which is why you're basing your proposed off of, if you're doing that, you don't have anything in 2022, tell us how you got your proposal for your numbers for 2024.
Great, thank you, Karen.
I'll go ahead and stop sharing if you want to talk here.
Okay. Give me one moment.
And Amanda, just to give you a time, we've got 34 minutes.
Yep. Sorry, 1 second. It's there we go. Let me just get back to that slide. Okay, application guidance by section. One thing I just want to let you guys be aware of, if and when you're logged into Zoom Grants, you have the ability to hide tabs, so you don't have to keep scrolling all the way down. So you'll see like the introduction, the program summary. You have the ability to hide those. Within, again, tab 2, you're identifying, does the funding fit? Please, if you are doing a copying and paste to the application, make sure that you're pasting in a plain text format. Otherwise, it may not necessarily capture that information. In the past, I've done that before when I've created a program. Came back about 15 minutes later and all of my application questions were missing. The reason for that, I did not do a plain text paste. So if you are working off of a Word document, which oftentimes, I do, just make sure that as you're entering that information, that the system's capturing it. Videos are very impactful. If you're not able to submit a video, photos, visual, something that helps identify what the need is, why are you asking for the money. If it is a facility improvement, for example, and you're asking for a new roof, what is the condition of that roof? What is the reasoning? Why are you asking for that? And again, just make sure that your revenue and expenses match on tab 4.
I'm going to add one other tip. You're not seeing it up here, but when you are in tab 3, question number 1, there's an executive summary. I think it's 1,000 characters. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
I want to tell you what happens to that. That executive summary comes out and it goes over into a mayor's book. And that's all they get. The mayors do not review your entire application. That's done by the citizen committee. So when you are doing that executive summary, read the directions on that and speak to exactly what's said in a very concise manner. What are they asking for? What are the outcomes? What is the population that's served? Just be very concise and know that we take that, we put it over in the summary for the mayors, and that's it. So if you look at that, and I say the grandma or the aunt, or the significant other role that knows nothing about what you do, take that to them and have them read that and say, can you really get a sense of what we're trying to do and what we're going to accomplish and how much we need in order to do it? Have it do that for your entire application, but especially your executive summary, because that's what the mayors do.
Also, I want to let everybody know that the application, the naming convention, so when you are creating your application, that application title is what we use throughout the process. So in the past, we've had some individuals, and it's not necessarily this group, but with the community and support service, they're not aware at the time of applying which funding source they're actually going to be funded from. And so at the very beginning, we ask them to identify what are the potential funding sources that you're eligible for. If in the naming convention, and it can be a little confusing, if you're, example, doing rapid rehousing, but you name it homeless prevention, it could be a little confusing. What am I trying to say here, Karen?
I haven't had enough copy either. I think just be very concise. It's a little bit different for the soft cost applications because then we're getting into programming, and that's a little bit different. Everything that you're doing with the hard cost, so you can be pretty specific on what that is. Just making sure that it's a hard cost. What's the facility? And just make sure that it ties into what the funds are going to pay for. So, another just a nuance there that you might want to be aware of. All the funders being Salt Lake County, Salt Lake City, the state, the COC, all those, we do talk. We get together in meetings and we say, okay, we have this application, you've got this application. And so we look at them all, and if they all have different names, we're going to look at those and say, okay, well, wait a minute, we're funding this one, you're funding this, and then we're going to have to dig in, and we may or may not have time to do that. So if you've got the same project and you're going to multiple funders, please use the same name, because that's going to help us coordinate, and that's also going to help us identify gaps.
Great. Do we have any questions at this time? Okay. Here is a visual of the CDBG eligibility map, as well as the hyperlink. Again, just be aware we're in the process of updating these documents, and we'll provide it on our website, where you'll be able to find a few of these other resource documents. Right now, our website is still in the process of being updated for current year documents. So I would encourage you all to reference your library tab in Zoom Grants for the most current documents. We do expect within the next couple of weeks to have our forms updated on our website. as well as the eligible mapping area. Has anybody used, yes, go ahead.
Just a quick question, are these both gonna be updated before the due date?
Yes, yeah. So the question was, are these documents going to be updated before the due date, November 22nd? Yes, they will be. We're hoping maybe by the end of the week, we should at least have a draft for us to review and make sure. But Karen is actively working with that. Training requests. Karen, do you want to?
So this came out of that needs assessment provider convening last year, and so what you're seeing is from that. We actually just wanted to take a minute and ask you, from above and beyond what you see here, we heard that applicants wanted more information on the review process, so Amanda took quite a bit of time this morning to walk you through that process. We heard what are other places that have money available and what's that timing? We need to improve on that still. Work in progress, because we're all on different schedules with the different fundings. We also, I do want to say though, if you haven't used our master contact update list, where you go in and say, I want to be on these email lists. When we get an opportunity, let's say we get an OPA for domestic violence, if I have you listed on that and it says, I want to hear about grant opportunities, we're just going to pull whoever's in that, we're going to shoot that out, because we usually get 1 or 2 a week that say, here's a new funding opportunity. So identify that in that master contact list, and that will help us let you know if something outside of the county is available. Concerned about how data is being used. We're trying to address that to be very transparent about where we're getting our information, how it feeds into our priorities. And then also, we hear you when you say, we give you all of our information, we report to you, we tell you all this stuff, and we don't know what to do with it. We are working on that. We are trying to improve and close that feedback loop, as well as with our dashboards and things that we're doing internally, so that you can see how your project is part of the bigger whole, so you can see what are the impacts of reporting or other things. We are working on that. How are applications reviewed? Again, we went through that. Capacity and partnerships, measuring the same thing. No, it is not. If you don't know that, you're going to see some things related to capacity. You're going to be asked questions for partnerships. Partnerships may impact your capacity, but what we're really looking at is your organization, is your jurisdiction, is your team. Do you have the capacity based on who your team is, based on prior performance, based on your budget? Do we see that you actually have the capacity within your team to carry out the project that you say you want to carry out? And that may involve partnerships. It may say, yep, this is not our thing, but we are bringing in somebody else to fill this part. And that's how we're going to be able to do what we say we're going to do. Is HUD goals or local goals that are prioritized? That is both. There's HUD goals, there's the county goals, there's the state goals, there's needs assessment. All of those come together in the prioritization. Probably the biggest weight is put on feedback from citizens and providers. That's where the biggest weight is for these funds. But beyond that, I just want to take a minute. Is there anything that you're not seeing here that as you're going through these processes that you're saying, we need more training or we need more information? Anybody want to add that as we keep the list? I would love to see more about technical assistance on about the funds. It's different, the whole funds. It's such a big ask for new grant staff, new agencies to understand the funding sources, and it kind of comes as a big burden on staff to figure it out. So maybe just more information about the funds, where they're coming from. Really good comment. And that helps kind of bring us back. The question was technical assistance on just understanding the different funds. You have new staff turnover all the time, and you're trying to figure out what's the difference between home, between CDBG. What is this? Why is it that the city's asking for this? What is home art versus home? What is so? Yes, we will continue to work, because the more concise that we can get, so you can. I feel you, because got new grant staff that's been here a month or a week, and you're saying, write this grant, and they're going, what grant? What is it that we're applying for? I hear you. We'll note that as another training request and have it be approved. Yeah.
I know it's specific and it just breaks it down like online and everything, but for the difference of the hard and soft costs. So sometimes when I was looking through, I'm like, how's that a soft cost? And that is, those kind of things. So I wonder if I have sitting in here, I have
Really, really good point. It's kind of like we talk in acronyms. I just think that everybody knows what we're talking about. And I actually, as I was going through, I wondered, because I'm in the language of hard and soft costs, so we can do better at that and describing what is a hard cost in infrastructure, housing, land, those activities versus what is a soft cost. And for us, soft costs pull in public. CDBG has this piece, it's 15% that can be a public service, meaning it can be used for operations, for salaries and benefits, for supplies, for things that aren't the activities of hard costs. See, even now I'm going, well, I'm trying to do this. But that 15% of the CDBG that we pull out for soft cost is then added to our social services block grant money and our emergency solutions grant money to become our community support services. Those are very specific activities. And probably for now, because I really did not do a good job of giving you that explanation, that if you look at the two funding, it's in the first tab of Zoom grants, and it will say funding priorities, and then it will say eligible activities. It will list what are the eligible activities in the hard cost, and what are the eligible activities in the soft cost. Okay. All right. And for IRC, one of those greatest crossovers, as far as it could be either, is economic development activities, which then it comes down to how are you reporting, because you may have something that the program could be either for an economic development activity, but it depends on what we're paying for. Are we paying for salaries? And then what are you reporting on? Are you reporting on the individuals that you're serving, or are you reporting on, based on their household income, or are you reporting on everybody that's receiving technical assistance? So anyway, there's some nuances there. Another good point that we can improve on.
Great.
Anybody else?
Great questions. So one thing I do want to point out, if you look at the Federal Application Handbook, and starting on page 8, going to page 10, you'll see some of those activities that have been identified. And you'll see what we have prioritized. A few other things I want to point out within this handbook. If you're looking at additional eligibility requirements, here you'll see that your eligible activity must meet one of the 3 national objectives. So, whether it's a benefit to a low to moderate client, area benefit, is this a housing activity? Is it creating jobs? Third-party verification of income is required to qualify a person documented as a low to moderate income for activities that are benefiting clientele or a household and creating jobs. On the next page, you'll see yes.
Oh. But I do want to add one positive feedback. We had Amanda come out to give us feedback on our application. It was incredibly helpful.
Thank you.
You've changed how we submit a lot of applications. So thanks for that.
Thank you.
Positive feedback.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's so helpful.
Yeah, thank you. Great feedback. That was part of the agency debriefing. So again, we encourage you, if you're awarded funding, we could still do the agency debriefing. Sometimes we don't get applicants that want to do that because they are already receiving funding. And they, figure their application was great. Each year, I notice that it becomes more competitive, and the scoring is really close. So, it could be a great application, but there may be one that was a bit more informative and they score better. And so, unfortunately, you're not able to be funded at that time. If you look on page 12, you'll see the federal income guideline. Here you'll notice these are the fiscal year 23 income guidelines. Each year we update this, and remind me, when do we update this, Karen?
Usually it's released by June, and HUD releases by June, sometimes earlier by June.
So within the application, again, you would be referencing these income limits at the time that, if you are awarded funding and we provide a contract for the program, the services, we will provide an updated document. You'll just want to make sure that you're tracking income guidelines within that period of performance that are specific to that time frame. Let's see. Again, applications are submitted through Zoom grants. Here on page 17, there you'll see the overview of the evaluation criteria. And just going to page 20, reference material. In your in your packets, you do not have some of these appendices. We have attached them in Zoom grants under the library tab. But for example, if you're looking at the outcomes, again, you've identified what your eligible activity is. You've identified what your national objective is. Now you're going to identify what your outcome is and provide the output that we've identified, and you're going to do an outcome which is tied to a SMART goal. And Karen, do you want to speak to that?
Oh, I love outcomes. Anybody just talk about outcomes versus somebody give me an output. Tell me what you're doing. What are you doing? Tell me what your programming is or what your project is.
Don't just decide for hard cost, but as an example,
Okay, so let's dive deep into that. Let's talk about your plan. Tell me about what you think you might be asking for.
For soft cost?
Hard cost.
Hard cost? Looking at, I don't know if it's eligible or not, but looking at renovating already used space to shelter homeless families.
Okay. So, Dan, I'm gonna put you on the spot here. Pull up. What do you think? It's going to be a public facility improvement because you're talking about renovating something, and the eligibility or what it is as far as hard cost is concerned. The activity is going to be a public facility improvement. Dan, tell me what you see as far as outputs that they're going to see in their in Appendix C, or what might, I don't know what yours are, but tell me what it might be for an output or for the performance indicator that we're going to track.
In terms of shelter, we're seeing basic needs being met. So it would make sense to me to be under the basic and foundational needs. That could be critical needs or issues remedied, safety issues, those kind of things.
Okay, so your output, what is it that we report? Okay, we're going to check a box to say you met a critical need, or there's a safety issue that you met. Because that's going to fit into what HUD says. That's what's eligible. That is an output. What is the outcome? What is the impact on the people that you serve by meeting those critical needs or doing that public facility improvement?
I would say working alongside case management for affordable and sustainable housing.
Okay, and what is the impact on their lives? We're gonna keep stretching this. What is the impact on their lives? Your homeless people that now work with the case manager, what is the ultimate outcome? 5 years when you look back and you say, look, we had this building, we were able to serve these people, they worked with case managers, what has happened to their lives?
Economic stability.
Okay. Self-sufficiency, economic stability. Maybe they're housed. So what we're going to challenge you to do, and the question that's in this, because normally you don't see it in hard cost projects, you see it in soft cost. It's much easier. But I am still saying that even if you're MSD and you are our engineering department and you are putting together those street improvements, sidewalk loops, and you now have kids who can walk safely to school, or now you have community members that can access things because they have a sidewalk, or maybe you have people in a wheelchair that can now actually go down the sidewalk to get to the store in Magna. What is the impact on their life, besides the fact that you did a curb cut or an ADA improvement or infrastructure improvement? What is the impact on their life? What does their life look like? They're safer. They have better transportation. They are more economically mobile because now they can actually, get to school, get education, whatever it is you type. So what I'm going to encourage you to do, and this is kind of a shift from the hard cost mindset. Jason, yours is a little bit easier, okay? With assist, give me an example. Even though it's a hard cost activity, you've done rehab, you've done senior aging in place, tell me what the outcome of your service is.
I think going back to outputs, like an output would be, we did an emergency home repair for a family. I think an outcome is that the family is able to stay in their home and maintain their job. So
Yes. The output is what you
Great.
paid for. That's the activity. That's what we paid for the rehab, the construction. But the outcome is that person is able to stay in their home. The senior is still there. Their life is better. So, again, I'm encouraging you to shift. There's only one place, but we want you to tie in those outputs, those performance indicators that you're going to mark, and tell us what their lives look like. Because I am guaranteeing you that even though our CDAC committee comes in and they're mathematicians, they like numbers and they're really good at it. But they also have these heartstrings that you can pull. And so after the numbers are done and after they make sure that your budgets match and that your expenses and what your proposed expenses actually meet your proposed revenues, when they're all done with that, what's really going to get you up that 0.2% of a point that may make a difference in recommended for funding is whether or not you tied it to the impact on the people in this community.
What if your impact is very difficult to measure? So for example, in a rape scenario, there's not always a measuring stick of how much did we help you at the hospital, right?
Okay.
So it's an emotional thing, but how do you measure their emotional support over that 4 or 5 hour, 6 hour interaction with them and say, oh, well, they were able to keep their job, or they were able to have a peace of mind. How do we measure that?
So rape recovery, to be specific, typically uses basic and foundational needs because it is basic. If you go back to Maslow's hierarchy on that very bottom of that, what is it that you've achieved? Maybe only momentarily, but maybe it's a feeling of safety. It's safety. Because they have been supported in that worst possible moment. That doesn't mean that they aren't still having PTSD and having those issues and everything else. But what is the impact of having that advocate there at the hospital to come and talk to them? So when they leave the hospital, they feel supported and they feel safe. That is the impact. That is your outcome. And maybe they can go to work next week because they don't have to hide in their house because they feel so unsupported. So you're going to have to, your grant writers, your mission, your people in your organizations are going to have to figure that out because you know who you're serving. And you know, and you have to go to move out of your, fill in the numbers in the boxes. You may have to go to your case managers or somebody on the front end and say, what do you hope if you meet this person at Walmart 2 years from now? What do you hope to see with the impact of their life from having our services available? And speak to that in the outcome. Okay, sorry, I went long on that. I get very passionate about outcomes and things. So we're having a Q&A.
Great questions. We have one more question.
Can you give an example of the infrastructure we have a building and there are things you want to improve in that building, would that be considered more on that, the infrastructure or the public facility improvement? What is the difference? What am I looking at as differences?
On that list. Okay, give me 1 second. So with the infrastructure, and correct me if I'm wrong, Karen, that's going to be tied more to the jurisdiction applications, which would be an example of like a sidewalk improvement, making something ADA accessible, curb, so for example, in Magna, older communities, older neighborhoods, there's not a lot of sidewalks. Within their master plan, they are working on incorporating and identifying those areas and putting in ADA accessible sidewalks.
So it has to be more public facing rather than like, say, putting in an elevator in the building or adding ramps in the building.
Okay, so that would be tied to a public facility. Yeah. Great question. Yes.
So we work with a variety of cities, with CDB funds for home improvement.
Okay.
Cities all allow us to do grants. The contract we had last year with the county was it had to be a loan, and which is really difficult, especially the population that we're serving. And I'm just curious as to why we could only do a grant up to $5,000 and everything over that had to be a loan, where all the cities, the same CDBG funds, we could do grants up to $20,000. So. And the problem was that they can't afford another payment. So just curious as to why it had to be a loan and not a grant.
Great question. I'm going to let Karen answer that.
So in the last 10 years, there's been some shifting in internal policies as far as what is the best use of our funds. You're going to see that reflected in the down payment assistance where we're saying it is not prioritized. We're not saying it's not eligible, but it's not prioritized. Because if I only have $400,000 to put out, and I put $200,000 of that for the down payment assistance program, but I have to pay $50,000 per household. That means with my $200,000, it's half of my entire allocation I'm helping 4 households. So it's this balance that informs internal policies. I will tell you that whether that's a loan or a grant, that is an internal decision, and I highly recommend that as we get to this, again, the needs assessment and giving your feedback, because the market we're in today doesn't look anything like 5 years ago. It doesn't look anything like when some of these policies, internal policies, were put together. I'm going to put Mike, our new division director, on the spot right here, because as we go into this needs assessment process, and you can come back and make those comments, say, hey, internal policy in ORD is pushing, but it's no longer effective for a rehab if they're picking up another payment. So come to the table and help inform internal policies. You're going to have a public comment period as well, and you always see, hey, if you want it's HCD comments, submit it in writing. Do you know what happens to those? Besides the fact that you put that in, is I have to attach those when we submit our plan or our paper to HUD. So everything that you see or that you say in those written comments, and when you submit it and say, this is what we appreciate, this is what is a challenge, this is success, this is what we think of your priorities, whatever it is that we're having a public hearing, put it in writing. I'm going to attach it to the end of our plan. I'm going to attach it to the end of our paper, and our division director and our department director and the mayor and everybody else is going to have that information to help inform policy and priorities.
Go back to Zoom, look at Zoom ramps, the hard costs. There's still a question, you would still,
lot of emails.
I'm gonna find her when she probably has like 500. One more thing, just want to point out, very last week of December, my goodness. These are very helpful. And we wanted to find out what the priorities are for. This year, as FYI, those activities that subject to this weekend, construction projects, which is that.
We're at 10:30 straight up. I do want to add one thing to what Amanda just said. Put in the backs of your mind here. And this is when you're putting together your proposals and your quotes. And I'm going to look at engineering. New legislation went into effect November 2022 for BABA. Build America, Buy America. We are still, as of a month ago, we are really struggling to get good guidance from HUD on what, there's a waiver that's in place for 5 years, but we're struggling for really clear guidance on what is applicable. If you're doing something with steel and your project is over $250,000, you're very likely going to have to keep that in mind because you're going to need to make sure that you're going to do steel. Some of the other things that we're still getting guidance on, there are materials and other things. There's materials in asphalt. There's material, there's things in other materials that we don't have guidance. With that, keep that in mind when you're getting your bids, when you're putting together these estimates. Guidance, because I don't have it. I'm just telling you that it's in effect. Funds that are awarded this year is absolutely in effect. What we don't have yet is clear guidance on that. So maybe as you're getting those bids, work that in and just understand what legislation requires. Of course.
How does that work? You say that, but I've read a ton on this, and it's so convoluted and like general in a lot of places. So I'm looking, so I'm like, okay, so even if you did like a kitchen remodel, which is something we're looking at, even if you're looking at certain appliances, a certain percentage of it, according to them, has to be made with American-made parts. Well, how is the contractor even going to know that? How does he know if the guts of it didn't come from Japan and this came from here and this came from here? And so I don't know how we can go to a contractor and say, what are they going to do? Go to their supplier or Home Depot and say, can you break down every nut and bolt inside this appliance?
I would say err on the side of maybe building it a little bit more and knowing that as soon as we get better guidance, we will send it your way. I wish I had an answer. I really do.
I don't know how you guys would make sense of it either. I've spent a lot of time trying to read it, and it's
We've been
ridiculous.
at 3 trainings in the last 6 months, and we still don't have firm guidance. All we know is it's in effect, and we know that it's applicable to the funds that we are now awarding. So I'm just saying, can you believe, see what kind of a deer in headlight look your contractor gives you when you say that. But just be aware of it. I wish I had a better answer to that, but we will inform you. want to talk about in the room, please come up. We've got